Purdue fans, this is Johnny DeCamp bringing you play-by-play the rousing...
Everybody, along with Ron Kramer, this is Pete Van Wieren welcoming you to Ross-Ade Stadium.
Live from Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette, Indiana.
It's a football Saturday in West Lafayette, Indiana, and one of the biggest home games in decades.
Boilermakers rush the field. What a night in West Lafayette.
Your Central Indiana Ford dealers are a proud sponsor of Purdue football and the Ross-Ade's Greatest Games podcast. Visit your local Central Indiana Ford dealer today. Welcome back to Ross-Ade's Greatest Games, brought to you by your Central Indiana Ford dealers. Thank you to them for their support of Boilermaker football and this Ross-Ade's Greatest Games podcast. I'm Corey Palm. He's Tim Newton, and we are going through some of the greatest games. Tim, today we are focusing on 1984. We're going all the way back to 1984. Jim Everett and the Boilermakers take out number 2 Ohio State in Ross-Ade in what was a great year for Everett and the Boilermakers. He'll join us in the second half of the show. Look forward to that conversation. But Tim, that was a great game between, two really, really talented opponents.
Yeah, going back and watching that replay, you realize there was a lot of talent on both teams. I mean, look at Ohio State. Mike Tomczak at quarterback, but Chris Carter at wide receiver. Keith Byers was in there. Kirk Loudermilk played on that team. Pepper Johnson. Tom Tupa was the punter. Chris Spielman was on that roster, although he was hurt most of the season. Great roster. They wound up winning the Big Ten and going to the Rose Bowl that year. And on Purdue's side, you had Rod Woodson, you had Jim Everett, you had Chris Dishman, you had Donnie Anderson. All those guys played in the NFL. So, yeah, it was a high-quality game and high-caliber competition at Ross-Ade.
No doubt. The Buckeyes were coming in averaging almost 40 points a game. Like you said, Byers, that day, it gets forgotten about the history, but he had one of the greatest individual performances Ross-Ade's ever seen.
Oh, no question, yeah. 190-plus yards. By the way, the offensive coordinator for the Buckeyes that day was a familiar name to Purdue fans, Glenn Mason, who wound up being Minnesota's head coach years later, and depending on who you believe was or was not offered the Purdue job when Joe Tiller took it. He obviously they brought a juggernaut to Ross-Ade Stadium, but they got sidetracked a little bit.
They did indeed. The Boilermakers. Let's go and go through the game a little bit. The Boilermakers come out and actually fall behind in the first half, trailing at the halftime, and then Byers with his second touchdown of the day coming out of halftime gives Ohio State, with their undefeated, their number 2 ranking, gives them a 10-point lead in the third quarter, and then things changed.
Things changed, and I'm looking forward to what Jim has to say about it, but he had a couple of big touchdown passes in the second half. He and Steve Griffin had a fantastic day. And then probably the play that will be remembered the most out of that game is after Purdue had gotten the lead in the fourth quarter, Rod Woodson jumped a route on the right sideline and took it down the field 55 yards for a pick-6 touchdown, and that really sealed the game, although there was a bizarre ending that we'll get into in a second, but a great second-half comeback by Purdue. And you remember as you watched that film just how good Jim Everett was at throwing a football. He was really, really good.
So much fun to watch. I didn't become a fan of Jim Everett until his NFL days. His teams in the late 80s were some of my favorite to watch as a child. I don't remember him as a Boilermaker, but going back and watching this film, phenomenal. Really, really one of the greats at a place that's had a lot of great quarterbacks.
And he was a guy that was recruited both as a quarterback, and some schools recruited him as a safety because he had played that position in high school and actually was a really good two-way player. But he made it pretty clear that he was a quarterback, and that was his position no matter what.
No doubt. Yeah, you mentioned that pick-6 by Rod Woodson, just a sophomore that year. But as far as on-field success, team-wise, it was the best year of his career at Purdue as far for the team. And we'll get to how the season ended in a second. But, Woodson jumped that route, gave the Boilermakers the 28-17 lead, and they gave up a touchdown. An ensuing touchdown to the Buckeyes, and then walk us through that ending. Ohio State had a chance.
Well, so the Buckeyes scored a touchdown with about 3 minutes left to make it 28-23. They went for a 2-point conversion and missed it. Then they decided to kick off, and Purdue was not able to move the ball. So the Boilermakers had to punt, and Ohio State had the ball in their own territory with about 2 minutes left. They marched down to Purdue territory. They converted I think it was a 4th and 25 at one point in that drive, on not surprisingly a pass to Chris Carter. And they got into Purdue territory, and it was on a 3rd down play. It was about the Boilermaker 30 or 35. They had a play, and I don't remember if it was a completed pass, but it was short of a 1st down. So it was 4th down, but Ohio State was out of timeouts, and the clock was running. So it had to have been a completed pass, but short of a 1st down. And Tom Zach looked over to the chains, which ironically, a member of the chain gang was Bob Downing, whose son Doug Downing was the backup quarterback for Jim Everett at Purdue. And, the lore is they were, and I don't think they did it intentionally, but they were a little bit late flipping the down marker from 3 to 4. Tom Zach looks over, sees 3 on the sign, and figures, okay, I'm going to stop the clock. I'm going to throw the ball out of bounds. He did. Unfortunately for him, it was 4th down, and that wound up being Ohio State's last play of the game. So they essentially had a chance to get a 1st down and keep a drive going and possibly score the winning touchdown. But Tom Zach lost track of the downs and threw the ball out of bounds on 4th down.
And, Tom Zach went on to a long NFL career. We've got a lot of Bears fans who also double as Purdue fans, so I won't call it a great NFL career, but
it was a long NFL career.
He played for a long time, which speaks to his talent. He was just a youngster in that game, just a freshman, and leading one of the best offenses. But I'm sure he'd like to have that one back. Everett comes up. Well, also, and you don't know how it's going to play out, right? Maybe they get the first. Right. Maybe they don't. Maybe they didn't. They have to have a touchdown. Right. So who knows? But we do know what actually happened. Jim Everett comes out, takes a knee, and there's one of the great field stormings in Purdue history. The field is just enveloped in people.
And the goalposts were attacked on both ends. The times have changed a little bit, but a great day at Ross-Ade Stadium. And it is, again, you just look at the talent that both teams had assembled that day, and that was a big time Big Ten football game.
It was a great year for the Boilermakers. It started with a win, the first event in the Hoosier Dome, in 1984, a win over Notre Dame. Great game there. And then a few weeks after the Ohio State game, another thriller against Michigan. The Boilermakers took out the Wolverines in a 31-29, I think was the final there.
Yeah, and a game where Purdue had a huge lead at halftime, and Michigan came back, and actually Michigan got down close to the Boilermaker goal line late in the game, and Purdue came up with a goal line stand to hold that one up. But yeah, the first Purdue team to defeat Ohio State, Michigan, and Notre Dame in the same season.
Just phenomenal. The season ended in a trip to the Peach Bowl and a late loss to Don Mikowski and the Virginia Cavaliers.
Yep, the Virginia Cavaliers. Yeah, Purdue had the lead in that game, and Mikowski led a second half comeback. And you look at that team and think about the teams that they beat, but they only wound up with a 7-5 record overall. So just one of those years that they apparently got really up for the big games, and just weren't able to get that consistency throughout. And it was Leon Burtnett's only winning season as a head coach at Purdue. And 2 years later, he was basically out of a job.
But a lot of glory days that year. And like you said, the first team to beat the 3 Giants, and to this day, the only team for Purdue to take down Michigan, Ohio State, and Notre Dame.
How would that be these days? When you look at those teams right now, it's always been a big feat, but it would be, I think, even more impressive right now.
It would be. We're holding out hope, though. We live on hope here in Boiler Nation. Without further ado, let's go and get to Jim Everett and his recollections from that day right after the break.
Your Central Indiana Ford dealers are a proud sponsor of Purdue football. Visit your local Central Indiana Ford dealer today.
We're joined now by the great Jim Everett, Purdue legend and NFL legend as well. Great LA Ram and such a wonderful career in pro football. Jim, thanks for finding some time for us here.
Oh, you bet, Corey. Tim, it's good to be with you, Corey. As I look at you, man, I'm catching my eye going to the back, seeing all the Purdue paraphernalia back there and your water bottles and stuff like that. It's pretty impressive behind you, Corey. You are gold and black.
Well, I don't have anything as cool as a framed Rams jersey like you do, so I've got a piece.
I got my Steve Young back there too, so Saints is on that side over there.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we're representing.
I love it. Well, we're talking today about 1984. Your Boilermakers take down number 2 Ohio State in the middle of your junior season. What do you remember when you think of that day?
Well, we were, it reminds me a lot of a few years ago when we beat Ohio State at Purdue, a few years back, that whole feeling, but what you said leading up to the game, man, I was nervous. There's no two ways about it. You're playing the number 2 ranked team in the country. You're on, prime time. It's, they've got a guy named Byers who's doing whatever he wants, running the ball. And we knew we had to kind of like score some points because he was going to score. You just knew that. And, as the game went on, we found that actually Ohio State was starting to be a little bit one-dimensional, meaning that they thought that they could just blitz us and put us into submission. And while that might have worked a little bit in that first half, that second half we came out with some adjustments. And I know we had a black 85 call with some audibles, so we caught them twice on audibles and for touchdowns. And at that point, they got a little bit more respect, as far as when we started putting. But it's the Rod Woodson play. He comes up with a big pick, and you need to. It's a whole team thing. It's special teams. It's offense. It's defense. And then it's also they had a freshman quarterback, and spiking the ball on 4th down kind of was helpful for us on the final drive. So
yeah,
thanks, Mike.
And there's always been some debate, Jim, of whether our sideline guys on the chain gang were a little bit late flipping the yardstick from 3 to 4, because I heard he looked over and saw the 3 there and thought he had another down, but. We call that home field advantage here at Purdue. Right?
I heard rumor that was Doug Downing's dad too, so maybe that was a little.
I can neither confirm nor deny that rumor. How about that?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Downing, for all these years.
You look at the star power in that game, Jim. You had, of course, yourself, Rod Woodson on your side, but you talked about Keith Byers, Chris Carter in that game, Mike Tomczak, who played in the NFL, Pepper Johnson on the defensive side. I mean, that was some pretty high quality competition on the field that day.
Oh, Pepper Johnson had an extremely good career and a very physical guy, and that's what you get whenever you line up against Ohio State or a Michigan or whatever. You're going to get their 5-star athletes, and they had those guys. It's a matter of, can you play together as a team and have your parts excel what the pieces are, and that's what we did, and that's what you need to do. And part of it comes with belief and faith. And it'll be one of the things that I would tell the program right now is that you have to dig down deep within yourself, because you can't look outside to find the answers. It has to come from within. And hopefully Coach Walters will get everyone playing. And sometimes they'll say, hey, maybe you're playing over your head, but that's just fine. Just play that way.
Yeah.
That 1984 season was magical in a lot of ways. It was the only time I believe that Purdue's beaten Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Michigan in the same season. And you were a big part of all 3 of those.
Oh, it was. I'll never forget that Michigan first half, and Bo Schembechler said the same. Everything I threw was just like guys one-handed catching it or a tip ball. Everything was landing towards us. I don't think we had a few incomplete balls that first half, and we were up 28-0 against a Michigan team. So, I mean, we had some good players. We had, Leon had a good defense set up. We had some good offensive guys. Rodney Carter, Ray Wallace, Bruce King. We had some players too that were in the NFL that were very respectable. And I think maybe we weren't the 5-star athlete caliber, but we were good enough to go to the bigs. And and then I'm pulling the trigger, and that seemed to work out all right too.
Chris Dishman too. Chris Dishman was another guy that played in the NFL. Yeah, and
Donald Anderson, who was a second-round draft pick for the Colts. So their secondary was very respectful, and Rod was really young at that point. So it was good. It was a good group. But one of the best things I thought about that 84 team, and if I could talk a little bit about it, was team chemistry. We had guys like Doug DeVos or Michael Berghoff, and these guys were walk-on guys, but they were all in. And when you have people in your program that are lifting up and everyone's carrying it, it really helps the program. If you have your guys that aren't playing all the time and they're not bought into the program, it's distracting. But that was not the case with the '84 Boilers. Everyone was dialed in. It was a good group, good chemistry.
But DeVos and Berghoff ended up doing okay for themselves too.
Yeah, they're doing all right.
They're doing all right.
Yeah, they're doing all right. Good guys, though.
Yeah,
that's the whole point. Is when you start putting a collection of good humans together, good things happen.
You talk about the collection of talent on the field. That coaching staff was very solid too. There were 3 eventual Purdue head coaches on that staff, and your OC Jim Coletto, the DC and Joe Tiller, and then of course Leon. To talk about what kind of leadership they gave you guys.
Well, I mean, it starts in any entity. I don't care if we're talking business, we're talking teams, we're talking about. It starts at the top and what you install. And one of the things that I thought that we did is, you take Leon for example. He was scrappy. He was not going to bow down to anybody. He wasn't going to bend to pressure, and you know that. And sometimes being politically incorrect sometimes can be hard. But Leon didn't have a worry in the world like that. So he let his guys. He wanted that junkyard defense. He wanted things to fly, and he was a little bit like that off the field too. But we took on his personality of being hardworking. That was a year we went through 3-a-days. We didn't do 2-a-days. Nowadays they're doing 1-a-days, but we did 3-a-days, and we had a guy named Fred Mills as well, who was working with our mind. So we were getting so physically tired that we actually mentally bought in even more. So it was a good thing. But what Leon did is he treated everyone like a grown man, a human, and he didn't micromanage his staff, and he didn't micromanage us, but he had high expectations, and I think that fed well to that '84 team.
Jim, when I think back on your days at Purdue and in the NFL, the first thing you think of is the arm. And anytime we bring a quarterback into Purdue now, to me, the guidepost is he as good as Everett throwing the football? Where did that come from? Was that did you have the God-given ability? It was a lot of weightlifting. Where did that cannon come from?
So I mean, I'm 6'5". I had pretty good leverage being able to throw, but high school I could throw about 78 yards. So I mean, my arm was pretty good, but there was a point, and I'll say this because life didn't just come on a silver platter for myself. Matter of fact, when I was battling with Scott Campbell, who was the quarterback the year before, I was really having a tough time, mental part, the whole part, coming in. And then at one point in time, I came in and started a game and threw 2 picks in Minnesota and got benched. And then actually Leon wanted me to play tight end. And people don't realize this. So I had to have the inner fortitude to say, no, I'm a quarterback. I'm going to keep doing it. And from that day forward, I mean, I did everything possible, mental, physical. I knew I had to improve. And so one of my things was I always take a 5-pound ball and then a 1-pound ball and just hit against the wall. And I had a strong arm before, but I definitely I kept that up, and it served me well in the pros as well, because we were throwing some skinny posts and doing some things that other people couldn't do. But it reminds me a little bit of the Josh Allen as I see today, with some of the throws that he can make and some of the other guys can't. And but I think it was half of it was God given and half of it was being motivated to make sure that I wasn't going to be a tight end.
Not that there's anything wrong with a tight end. You had a pretty good tight end that year in Marty Scott too, by the way.
Absolutely. I had Marty Scott, had Jack Berry. We were blessed with the tight end position. And I think that's a position, when you look at it, when Purdue has these good tight ends like they did a couple years ago, man, that's a security blanket. A lot of your downs where maybe you're trying to get the ball down the field and you just go ahead and take that 4 or 5 yards from your tight end is really, really key, especially for a ball control offense like we were. I mean, when we were playing, people don't realize this, but BYU and Purdue were the ones leading the nation in passing yards. And that's just the way it was. We had astronauts at Purdue and quarterbacks at Purdue, and that's why I wanted to be there.
That was going to be my question: is what you came all the way from New Mexico? Was it the Purdue's proclivity to pass that really brought you here, that caught your eye?
Well, it was Jim Young. It was the philosophy. I was looking at Stanford or Purdue. That's what it kind of came down to. Doug Scoville, he was down at San Diego State, but I wanted a more prominent. And they had John Elway at Stanford. So I didn't really know they had Scott Campbell at Purdue. So I thought I was going to be able to start a lot earlier, like Mark Herman did, who actually recruited me, and we're still good buds today. And that's one of the best things I see about, you talk about the cradle of the quarterbacks. People don't realize this. I was born in Kansas. I was a Kansas City Chiefs fan, and Lynn Dawson won that Super Bowl. And when I went to my recruiting trip at Purdue and watched an IU Purdue basketball game, and they honored Bob Greasy, Lynn Dawson, and everybody at halftime, I'm like, I think I want to be here. So it was Lynn Dawson I had breakfast with the next morning. He was my hero since 6 years old. So I was like, yeah, everything except for the lung dart I was good with.
Yeah, the Fresca and the heater. That's a Super Bowl. That's an iconic picture, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Hey, when you watch Jim, when you watch the NFL today, what do you think when, basically now if you breathe heavily on a quarterback, they're going to throw a 15-yard flag. It's a little different than when you played a few years ago.
Oh, it's a lot different. And I'm all in and all for it. So back in our era, if you look at guys like myself or a Vinny Testaverde or even a Roman Gabriel, if you want to go back that far, you kind of had to be, in baseball terms, a first baseman or maybe an outfielder size. Nowadays, because they've changed the rules, and I'll put it in baseball terms, you can be a second baseman or a shortstop and play the quarterback position because you're not taking that hit after you throw, because there was ball gone, and if they're a step and a half away, they're still hitting you, knees, head, whatever. So you had to have some resilience, you had to have some body mass, you had to have a little bit of bunker mentality, because you were going to get popped. And nowadays it's not as much so. And you see the Mahomes, and you see a good example would be a guy like Rob Johnson, who played at Buffalo in our era. He got broke a lot, his pieces, but he was a great athlete. Reminds me a lot of Mahomes, his body style and stuff. And so I think that era would have been better for a Rob Johnson nowadays. Dan Marino probably would still be Dan Marino today if he was playing. So it's the game is still a thrower's game. It's just more athletic to be able to buy a little bit of time. We're seeing that with the Justin Fields. We're seeing that with Lamar Jackson. I love the offenses. I brought Josh Allen up earlier. He's moving around, buying some time. So, you're not getting that clean pocket because those defenses are bringing the dogs, the blitzes, all the different stuff to slow you down. And you're seeing that more and more. But you have to have some escapability. Even Brock Purdy has some escapability, and that lends well to today's game.
Jim, we mentioned Berghoff and DeVos before. You've done pretty well for yourself after football. Tell people what life was like after you hung up the cleats.
Well, when I hung up my cleats, I was the least educated in my family, and I got a great Purdue education. But I went back and got my master's, and I started an asset management business, investments, and did that for 15 years before my body started needing some new parts, and that's been an ongoing process lately. But man, modern medicine is pretty good. The metal and the hips, the backs, the shoulders, whatever they put in, it's good stuff. But and now I'm doing a little stuff here in Los Angeles. Maybe you'll see me on a little here and there, doing some stuff for CBS. You never know. Maybe in a commercial. You never know what's going on.
We'll make sure next time you come back to campus, we'll save a spot in the booth for you. I know Herman will give up his headset for a few series for you.
Oh, I know. I just can't believe that Mark even gets a moment on the mic. I mean, he took it away from who's
Pete Quinn.
Oh, Mr. Pete Quinn. He won't give the mic back to Pete because Pete won't give it up. But Mark's always been. And Mark is such a classy guy. I think he's a good spokesperson. Mark is good people. And so are the people of Purdue. And I just hope that the product they put on the field improves. And I would just encourage each one of the guys to just improve every day, even though it's probably tough to go to work and get your stuff done, but you got to keep having faith and believing, and good things happen to those that continue to believe.
What's the thing you look most forward to when you get back to West Lafayette?
It was funny because I was standing on the sideline with Eddie, and that dude he's just massive at the time. I was like, holy cow. They had all the basketball recruits over there, and I'm like, I felt like a midget. So anyways, I think the campus looks great. It's fun to come back. I haven't been back in a little bit. All the stadium, the new tunnel they're putting in. I was actually over there before they put that in, and I thought that was really a cool upgrade that they're doing. But it's always good to be back and see the peeps, and hopefully I'll have a chance to get back soon.
Hope so. We really appreciate your time today. It's been fun for us to go down memory lane. I hope you feel the same.
Corey, Tim, I love it. Corey, I'm going to keep looking in your background and see if that one of those helmets actually fit you.
Or if your number's on it.
Not anymore.